But I'm really excited that we have Gail here today. So over the last couple of months, I've had quite a few different phone calls from pastors, from directors, from school board members, really wanting to know kind of what do we do? What do we do? My director left. What do we do? I want to retire, but I've been doing this forever and I want to leave my school in a really good place. Or, from a school board, chair, it is, we really are worried that, our director is getting close to retirement, then throw in all of the stuff that they've had to deal with COVID. We want to make sure that we have everything in place for that kind of a transition to happen. So walking people through kind of what their next steps can be to ease the transition. And so I reached out to Gail and said, hey, how would you like to do a webinar on transition planning? Because she planned her transition, I would say far before, the wheels of transitioning were really happening. There were a lot of things that happened, I would say, as far as 5 or 6 years out to say, hey, in the next few years, this is what I'm going to think about. So let's start getting some stuff in place. And so I thought she would be wonderful to be able to lead this webinar for all of you today. And as she will tell you, our transition was relatively seamless. So without further ado, I will give you Gail Tenney, Emeritus Executive Director of the ELEA. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Corey. So I know most of you who are on this call, most of you are not only friendly faces, but friends. And good to see all of you. And for those of you who I don't know, I am just delighted to be able to do this. And thank you, Corey, for asking me. In addition to the transition from my service as Executive Director of ELEA to retirement, I also transitioned, which Chris Dudek will remember, when I became ELEA's Executive Director in 1999, I had been an Early Childhood Center Director and made the transition from that program. One of those transitions went really well, and that's the one Corey's referring to. The other one did not go so well for the school that I left. And I'll tell you a little bit about that later and what I learned from that process, and actually from both. I've got a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to kind of go in and out of a few times, but we'll have lots of time for questions and discussion. So feel free to jot down notes, or if there's something just burning, feel free to, you can raise a hand, right? Is there not a feature, Corey, where we can raise hands? Oh yeah, it's under reactions, your reaction button at the bottom of your screen. You can always raise a hand if there's something you want to interject or ask. And then, as I said, we've got 90 minutes today, and I think we'll have plenty of time for some good discussion. So without further ado on that, let me go to my PowerPoint. So building a transition plan for success. There's just lots of things to think about. And the first one is the fact that, as we all know, things change in life. Just to do a check-in, you can all see the PowerPoint screen. Is that correct? Corey, can you see it?
No.
No. Okay. Let me go. Good. I'm glad I did a little check-in there. Let's see. Okay, now can you see my screen?
It says that you've started sharing. Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Let's.
And we have you in regular mode, not in presentation mode, which is fine, whichever way you want to do it. But
This is fine. This will work. If your photos on the right-hand side of your screen are prohibiting you from seeing the PowerPoint, yeah, I think you can just move that around or put it in a different mode. So hide your thumbnail video is probably what you can do. So we're going to talk about building a transition plan for success. And I had sent out a little survey to those that had registered as of last week. So some of you may not have been able to participate in that, but that's fine. What I wanted to learn was how many of you are retiring, how many are interested in the webinar because you're moving to another school or center in a similar position, and how many are moving to a totally new career. And what I learned from the 15 responses I did get is that most of you are retiring. There's a few of you moving to another school, and I think only one person who was looking at a totally near career change. Most of you are early childhood center directors, along with a few pastors. So that's kind of the demographics of who's on here today. So I tried to gear the presentation to really fit that demographic. So the one thing we know, oh my goodness, that was not supposed to happen. The one thing we know is that things change. So whether you're thinking about switching jobs, switching careers, or retiring, there's a lot of change ahead. And as we all know, especially if you've gotten to the age of thinking about retirement, things change all throughout life. Corey, I think I'm going to have you put me in presentation mode for my PowerPoint to work properly.
So actually you have to just go to your slideshow and then it will do that. I'm trying to push your buttons for you. Like just play your slideshow. Like if you were going to play it.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, and it won't move into.
Okay, unshare and then do it and then share it again.
All right, I apologize, everybody. We're gonna get this. Yeah, the problem is once the PowerPoint is up, then I'm losing my ability to share. Oh, technical difficulties, you know.
You could share it to me if you want.
Oops.
All right, you're now seeing my first slide, but you're also seeing my slides on the side, right?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's how I'm going to have to do it. I just think that's the way it's going to work. I had it set for animation, so things would come up at one at a time, but I don't seem to be able to put it in slideshow viewing.
What about if you go to view? What do you see under view?
Normal outline view, slide sorter, slide master, reading view.
That works. That's bigger for me.
Okay, all right, let's see.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this will work. We're going to give this a whirl. Again, apologize for the technical difficulties. So things change. And I know this, the older I get, I mean, everywhere from the fact in politics where half of my Republican friends are now Democrats, half of my Democrat friends are now Republicans, some of my Catholic friends are now Lutherans, and some of my Lutheran friends are now Catholics. And then we get to the issue of talking about the birds and the bees with kids. So we used to talk about the birds and the bees, and now we talk about the birds and the birds, and the bees and the bees, and the bees that used to be birds, and the birds that used to be bees, but still have their stingers. So even love and sex are getting extremely complicated these days, and things are changing. a lot of things in my life have changed. A lot of things in your lives have changed. And that doesn't even address COVID, what everyone's been dealing with the last few years. So we're going to spend some time helping you think about your upcoming change, whatever that might be, and develop a process to ensure that the changes have had are positive and not negative. So without getting out of the PowerPoint presentation, if there is anyone here that isn't retiring, maybe we can do the hand raise. Let's see. So show thumbnail view. Corey, are you able to see the thumbnails? Okay, I'm seeing who's raised their hands. Okay, so I've got one person that isn't retiring, so you're probably transitioning out somewhere else. Most everyone is dealing with a retirement situation, I'm assuming. And then some of you are moving to a similar role in another school, quite possibly. Some may be moving to a new career, and some of you may be doing something else. So sometimes the thought of leaving is just so overwhelming. You don't even know where to start, taking all that's in your head and transferring it to new leadership. And there's only one way really to do this, and it's the same way you eat an elephant. It's just one bite at a time. So we're going to try to break this down into some steps. And the first step is, before we even get to an actual action step, is to remember that the church owns the school or center. You don't. And that is so difficult because for many of you, you've been doing this so long, you have so much ownership in this, and the church quite possibly has not accepted the responsibility for the program that they should or that you would like them to. But unless there's some really unique circumstances, and once in a while we do find a school where there is a different model of ownership, but 99% of the time, the church owns and operates the school. It's their tax ID number, it's their liability insurance, they are in charge. And it's really hard to walk away from that if you feel that they aren't taking full responsibility. One of the things I want to share with you, and Chris, you probably remember this, maybe Corey does as well. Bill Hurst, who's the pastor at First Lutheran Church and School in Torrance, California, was on our ELEA board of directors some years ago. And one of the things he shared that I have never forgotten is, as he talked about churches saying, well, you know, do we really want to keep this school or center going, or do we want to start one? Because we're not getting any members out of it. We're really not getting any members. And Bill always had this mantra that it depends on how you define membership. So this is something if you feel it's appropriate to share with your church, he would say that really, they're not members. These people are on our campus, most of them twice a day, dropping off, picking up children 5 days a week. They are paying more in tuition than most people sitting in the pews on Sunday morning are giving. Many of them are volunteering in the classroom, volunteering on field trips, volunteering in a myriad of ways. And they are certainly part of the life of this church. They may not have, this is back in the days of Rolodex cards, they may not have a Rolodex card in the office saying they're a member. They may not be counted in the annual congregational report, but they are very much members of the community. So if it's helpful for you to use that analogy with your church to help them understand that they own the school, you don't. So the first step for you to take is really to make the decision to retire or leave. It sometimes is easier leaving for another position and sometimes harder retiring, particularly if lots of your life and emotions have been wrapped up into your position. And if you were the founder or have what is known as founder's syndrome, which means no one remembers a time when you weren't there, even if you weren't the first director, no one remembers who was. It can be very, very difficult. And we're going to talk a little bit more about founder's syndrome in a minute, but I also want to just share with you that it's really important that you have a personal retirement plan. And most of us think that we're going to spend our initial days and weeks after retirement sleeping in, going for long walks, cleaning out our attics, our garages, our closets, spending more time with our grandkids and our family, going out to lunch with friends. And hopefully you will do all those things, because all of those things are important. But then the day usually comes for most people that we just don't feel we have a lot of purpose in life after having such a terribly busy job. So when I decided I was going to retire as ELEA's director, I had friends and family that said to me, you know, maybe you ought to take this in chunks. First, you ought to try working 40 hours a week, and then maybe 30, and then maybe 20, and work your way down, because I tended to be more like a 60-hour-a-week person. So that abrupt end to that busy schedule can be very jolting, no matter what you have in mind. And eventually the closets and the garage and all those things do get cleaned out, and you start looking around for a little more to do. So I just urge you to plan ahead so you don't lose your sense of worth and purpose and hit a wall. Plan ahead for board service on an organization you care about, volunteer service, keeping some kind of a schedule, learning not to feel guilty about the days when you really feel like doing nothing or something frivolous. There's a lot of folks, and I haven't looked at the statistics on this recently, but it used to be reasonably high. They end up in a therapist's office about 6 months to a year after they retire, because they have become very unsure of what's next in life. If we tend to be, and I've used this analogy before, and it's not meant to offend anyone, but we are kind of control freaks. We wouldn't be good at our jobs if we weren't. You would not be a good director if you were not a control freak. So that means that you're going to be in a situation where you're not going to have as much control over things. And as we get older, some of things in life start controlling us instead of us controlling them. So to look at the whole founder's syndrome and what you can do about that, part of it is being able to pass the baton and give leadership opportunities to the staff now before you retire, making sure they really feel ownership, getting them involved in some of that process, assigning tasks that it's amazing. I mean, I found when I was a director, some of my staff had gifts I didn't know anything about. And when I was still a director, we were just really in infancy stages of using computers for things. But now, of course, that's the life that we live. And many or most of them might be able to help with certain things, and in fact be glad that you ask them for their input or their assistance. Craft a succession plan for you and the other key leaders, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Get some outside help if you need to. Sometimes having a consultant come in and kind of evaluate the situation, especially if you're in a big program, in a big center. Plan your communications so that you're telling your staff, your parents, all those folks in some kind of logical way. Plan out your communications. Do not join the board. Do not stay involved. That is, I mean, there are times where that may be appropriate if you have an assistant director that's taking over as director and they need a little assistance, or you have a brand new board and they want a little input. But I have seen a lot of failure from directors hanging on and getting involved on the board and then still basically being in control, and the new director feeling that they don't really have any autonomy. And you need to take some time to self-reflect. So again, the church owns the school. You can do your best to equip them to carry on, but if it fails or it closes, Do not take it personally. Think about and develop a personal retirement plan if that's the direction you're headed. And we talked a little bit about that. The next thing is to notify the powers that be, and whoever that might be, your board chair, council president, pastor, in writing. Make sure it's in writing once you have a date, and be specific on that ending date. And that becomes important because if you just say, I think I'm going to retire in another year or so, they will wait until 2 weeks before they get serious about doing anything about it. So having a date and kind of a timeline in place can be really useful for that. The more notice you're able to give, the more time and attention the board and the church leadership can give to developing an accurate job description, advertising, interviewing, all those things. But you also don't want it to drag on too long because, again, it can just become some rhetoric that they don't pay total attention to at that point. So meeting with your staff once you've officially given a notice is helpful. Answer their questions, seek their input, their thoughts on transitioning to a new leader. I mean, you might even have them do kind of an anonymous, some anonymous feedback on what they would like to see in a new leader. And we all have different gifts. We do things differently. There may be something that they feel is important for a new person coming in, or something that you're doing that they don't want the new person to do. So having some anonymous feedback could be useful. Work with the church leadership to form a search committee. And typically it is best for you not to be on this committee once the actual search begins. Now, in the survey that you filled out for me, there was one person who said that they had already hired their replacement and someone that will take over at the end of the school year. And I know that in many cases, and Corey, you and I have talked about this, that when you left your position as a preschool director years ago, the church just really didn't want to be involved in the search process, and you ended up hiring someone. Just if you don't mind sharing, Corey, what you think about when that's important and when that should not happen. Just anything you want to share on that?
Sure. Yeah, it wasn't ideal, but I was very autonomous in my director position, and everything was running very smoothly. So I don't think that the pastors or the church council felt any need to be involved. They just kind of wanted it taken care of. So I did ask one of the pastors to be involved in the committee. I had several parents, I had several church members, and I was very careful to go back to my staff and say, okay, we'll open it up. We'll get some applications. We'll look through those applications. They were not part of the interview panel, but they were definitely involved in the process. And, in the end, we ended up hiring somebody to be the director who had been a previous staff person. She'd been on staff. She'd been a teacher. Then she'd left for maternity leave and stayed home, with her youngest for a little while. And so this was a good time for her to come back in, and she ended up taking the position, and she still is the director of the school. But I think, I really wanted to make sure that parents, that the staff, and that the church council all felt good about the decision to hire whatever person we all decided on. But typically I would not ever suggest that a director be in charge of that committee.
Okay, thank you. When I left ELEA, we formed a search committee and had non-board members. That's the other part that's kind of important about a search committee, is it shouldn't just be the board. You're going to want some other church leadership involved in that, organizational leadership. When I left ELEA, I really stayed out of that process. I think there were some folks that thought that was not the case, but I did stay out of the process. I didn't even know who the applicants were. And quite frankly, I didn't even, Corey, I don't know if you remember, but I didn't even know whether you'd applied or not. She and I just didn't talk about it, just chose not to. I really felt that process needed to be autonomous, and I needed to not be involved in that at all. And I do think they hired the best candidate, but I didn't want to at all in any way try to influence that, because there may have been somebody else that brought some different gifts that would have been better in the position. I didn't know who the candidates were. So I just really think it's important to have this search committee that is somewhat separate from the board, and that you help them initially, you know, to form the criteria and have some input in the, because you know better than anyone what licensing requirements are, what kind of a person you need to be looking for. But you really don't want to be involved once that search committee's underway, unless you have a unique situation like Corey did. And we'll talk about that a little bit more during the question time in case someone's got thoughts or questions on that. But qualifications, certainly you're going to have to guide them, because you know what your state licensing, what your local requirements are better than they might. So writing the job description, all those things, producing a school profile document that's all rooted in the school's mission and identity, for all those kinds of things you certainly can be involved in. The search committee needs to publish the position, the profiles, the requirements, solicit the candidates, evaluate their materials, coordinate reference checks, do the interviewing after evaluation is done, and coordinating all of those pieces along the way. If the right candidate doesn't surface, and I think this is really important, encourage the call committee to hire an interim and keep searching. It's better to have no director in place than to have the wrong director in place. So I'll just tell you the little story about when I left Trinity Lutheran Child Care Center in Everett, Washington, which no longer exists, to take the ELEA position. I gave them 1 month notice, and we did not form a call committee. It was the board, along with the pastor, that really were working on filling the position. And I know it's difficult to find places to advertise and look for qualified candidates. We're going to talk about that a bit too. But they did get some candidates in the first round, and none of them panned out. So they did a second search, and they hired someone very, very hastily. And I had 1 week of overlap with her. And I knew from day one that this was not going to work. It was very evident to me she barely knew how to turn on a computer. And I had transitioned everything to, I don't know if any of you were around 20 some years ago when there were only a few of the management software programs available. And I was using CCM Turbo, Childcare Management Turbo, if any of you were familiar with that. We were just really getting on a roll with it. It was becoming very useful as a tool. And the new director, honestly, she had no interest in learning how to run it. She really had no bookkeeping experience. I heard her on the telephone with her own children when they got home from school the first day, and she was screaming at her children over the phone. And I thought, oh my, this is just a disaster waiting to happen. And the week went downhill from there. It was not a good situation. So at the end of the week, on the Friday night, I called my board chair at home, and I said, I just hate to tell you this, but I really think this is a mistake. I think that this is just not going to work for you. I've had a week with her, and she just clearly does not have the skills that are needed for this position. And the chair said, Gail, you don't work here anymore. It's not your problem. And plus, she's a minority, so we can't fire her. She'll sue us, which wasn't true. I mean, we all know if someone isn't working out job-wise, it doesn't matter what their ethnicity is. You can fire them if you need to. But they refused to do so. They felt they really needed to give her a chance. So from there on, things went really downhill. Staff were calling me at home saying, you won't believe what she did. Oh, plus my son and his girlfriend both worked part-time after school. They were high school students. And they would come over after work and say, oh my goodness, she had 17 kids on the playground, you know, with one teacher, way over ratio. She terminated a child for a behavior issue that should not have been terminated. Just the problems went on and on and on. And I tried talking, I tried intervening, not so much as former director, but now as ELEA director, because they were active members. And I really was told to stay out of it. And things went from bad to worse. Most of the good teachers left. Many of the parents pulled out their children. And a year later, they finally fired her, but the damage was done. And what I had volunteered to do on that Friday night, when I called my board chair and I said, this isn't going to work, I said, let's just go without a director right now. Our assistant director was qualified to handle things other than she wasn't comfortable doing payroll or the bookkeeping issues. And I said, I'll volunteer. I'll come in at night or on the weekends and do the bookkeeping and the payroll. And we'll just get by on an interim basis until you find the right person. And in retrospect, I think they learned very quickly that is what should have happened. So if the right candidate doesn't surface, just please encourage them to hire an interim, go with an assistant, someone that meets the qualifications, and keep searching, because we all know, and I know you've all hired the wrong teacher from time to time, we all have. It's better to have no one than to have the wrong person. So a few things that are helpful to turn over to the new person. And I'll just thought I'd give you a few samples of things. This is just a transition plan that I pulled off the internet. There's a million different ways to do these, but to be able to, all you have to do is Google transition plans, and you can say school or early childhood transition plans, and I'm sure you'll get some specifics, but having something in writing that really looks at by project, by activity, maybe it's by classroom, however you want to structure it. Having a sample is really useful. And I think that there's a number of things that can influence how long this should be or what it might look like. But depending on how much time you also have to train and work with the new director can make a difference on what you have available to give them. When I retired and Corey became the new executive director, we'd known each other about 10 years. She'd first served as a board member and then the associate director. So we knew one another well, we worked well together, and I was able to transfer information and work with her to disseminate it without her feeling that I was interfering and without me wondering whether or not she was capable. She just needed details and specific procedures explained. So we did a number of pieces that I turned over, and so we had a rough transition plan. A staffing chart can be really useful, especially if this is a new person coming in that doesn't know the staff. I want you to note the names that I gave these people, by the way, because I kind of had fun doing this page. So, you know, having a photo and their title and who they are, and obviously your staffing charts might be way bigger than this if you've got a lot of staff, but something so this new person coming in can identify and go back to the office and go, what's her name again? What's his name again? And be able to, instead of having to ask all the time, especially if you're in a large program. One of the things that I think was most useful, and I'll ask for Corey's input on this, but she has told me it was very useful, was to do an organizational chart this is just a sample from a Mennonite church, but just to show the layout so everybody knows the who's who and what the board members do. And you can find a sample organizational charts, or you can build one on Word or Publisher or whatever you use. But this calendar became really important. And this is a sample that I actually gave. This is a page of a calendar that I gave to Corey. This was from January, which seemed to be a pretty busy month. But just to give her an overview of what I would typically do during a given month. So I did this for the entire year. And you know, you can see on the first block here at the end of December, I secured the venue and finalized plans for the following year's conference, if it isn't done already. Post, distribute, promote Lutheran Schools Week materials, register for the March Cape Conference, meeting hotel. So just all these little pieces that were going to be part of her job, but putting them on a calendar instead of just on a blank piece of paper. And Corey, I don't know if you want to make any comments about some of the things I gave you that were useful, or things I gave you that weren't useful.
I will say it was not useful that Gail forgot to tell me about a pandemic coming. That's the thing that I've really kind of been a little disappointed about, because I thought I knew the job pretty well. And then I don't know who started it, but I was thinking Gail for a little while. But I just want to show you, I do have, I printed, oh, look, it like blocks itself out. I still have the calendar that she gave me in a paper version, because I write on it, I make updates to it. I have items where, like, I wanted more information than just I needed to remember it. I needed to know a little bit more of the specifics. So it's been a really helpful tool for me to have, to just go back and, you know, either to go back and say, oh, did I miss anything? Or to look ahead and say, okay, what things are coming and what things do I need to kind of be thinking about and preparing for mentally before they start to actually happen. I didn't appreciate the multitude of boxes of paper files. Okay, so we're going with pros and cons. Still have a lot of those that are so neatly packed away, and I love looking at them in my garage, and I do need to get them out and really dive through them. But we were able to share a lot of digital files. And in my transition, it was really nice that, you know, we could kind of work through things. I could start taking over some of the responsibilities that were new to me, that I might have questions on, while Gail kind of fell back for a little while and could do some of the behind the scenes stuff that that I already had a really good, you know, feel for, but she could kind of take that on as I stepped up towards some different things. So our transition was really, really smooth. But it does help that we had an extremely good working relationship, you know, prior to that. But, you know, she's always been a very organized person. And so, you know, so much of what was given to me is really easy to find now. So, you know, there are still days where I'll have to go and do a search, like in my Google Drive, and I'm like, I know Gail gave this to me. I know it's somewhere in here. I know I have examples of all of these things. It's somewhere in here. And sure enough, they pop up and I'm able to, you know, quickly refer to them and start, you know, moving in the direction that I need to. So that's been really, really helpful. And she's always a phone call away or a text away. Gail has this innate sense of remembering names and schools and the stories behind them. And so I'll be in a conversation with the board and I'm like, just hold on, let me text Gail, she'll remember, you know, and I'll be like giving her little tiny pieces of information. Well, it's a little town in Minnesota, and I think they might be called this. And she'll be like, nope, they're called this, and their director is this, and they were married to some guy I went to college with. So that's really handy. Another skill that, you know, is really beneficial in a transition. But you know, I think just the organized way we were able to transfer documents and transfer information was really helpful to me.
Thanks. So one of the things that I did that to try to break it down was I used flash drives and put specific topics, you know, like one flash drive was all conference materials and one was boot camp materials and one was whatever. But what, you know, you might think about that, of documents where you just, instead of giving the new person just this overwhelming amount of documents or handing them your computer and saying, it's yours now, good luck, find things. Having the fewer documents on your hard drive and the more, I think, on a flash drive, or in a Google folder or somewhere broken down, can be really helpful by topic. And you might want to do that, you know, one for each classroom. You might want to do one for parent policies, one for staffing issues, you know, whatever it might be, but come up with some logical folder names and then try to break it down so they're not having to look through just hundreds of random documents. I mean, I think now I know 20 years, ELEA, busy organization, and I created a lot of stuff, but so you're not going to have this, but I mean, I think I had like 132,000 files that I transferred to Corey. And some of them we ended up deleting, but I mean, at least I tried to break it down. And then of course I mailed her how many flash drives. It was like, here's a bag of flash drives, good luck. But I mean, there is a learning curve. There is a research process for the new person, and you can only make it so simple, but at least if you try to break it down, it can be simpler. One of the things that, a comment that someone made was, when I asked for the comments on this document I sent out, was trying to get, there's so many hats to wear. I'm finding it difficult to get things written down and organized. Any suggestions on keeping things clearly organized and tidbits for transition is helpful. So hopefully that is helpful. The things of the idea of having sample calendar, organizational chart, staffing chart, the more things you can do that, and those of you that know me, I'm not really a visual person. I'm a real linear person. Like I can just read pages of blah and it makes sense to me. But I've also learned that a lot of people can't. A lot of people are much more visual. They need to see pictures and something more creative. And so I've tried to be really mindful of that and integrate, as I've turned things over to folks, not just to Corey, but just other things to the board and whatnot as well, try to be a little more visual. And I think most people appreciate that. It's certainly quicker to look something up, the more visual it is and the less text is involved. So I know you have these crazy diverse jobs and there's lots of moving parts and pieces, but I don't think it's helpful to try to do one manual. And maybe the person who said, how will I ever get all this written down? If you're thinking about putting it together in one manual, that might be part of what makes it so overwhelming. I think it can be a series of shorter documents and pieces that can be pulled out as you need them. And whether some of them are in writing or they're all electronic, it is useful at least to have some kind of a master list that's in writing so they can say, oh, this is where I find documents related to this. This is where I find documents related to that. So they're not just hunting on flash drives and hard drives, not totally relying on that. So let's talk about let's have all of you join in here a bit. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see one another, but questions are the creative acts of intelligence. So there are no dumb questions. Let's see what kind of questions or conversation you want to have, and we can help each other. So you can unmute.
What do you think the amount of time for a transition? You said you had 1 week with the new director. How long do you think would be a good time to do the mind meld to the new director?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've been there a long time, Chris, and you've got a lot of stuff. I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt to have up to a month with the new person if the school can afford to pay those 2 salaries for a month. That's part of it too, you know, depending on people's budgets. Who else has thoughts on that? Or,
You know,
or, you know, go ahead.
Sorry, I really liked what we did, which was, I mean, and not granted, we weren't in the same space sometimes, but you know, we had some chances. We had the opportunity to work alongside each other for a while I was in this position. But then it was still, you know, kind of a check-in for a while. And then it's gotten to just, you know, holler if you need me. And we talked about that. I mean, I never had a problem feeling like, you know, you were stepping on my toes or anything. You know, I always felt very supported in what I was doing, but there is, you know, I think sometimes people have that, a new director might have the issue of feeling like, you know, there's some things I'd like to change or do a little bit differently. And I'm afraid to do it right now because I don't want this person to feel unvalued for what they've done. So too long can be kind of a detriment to their own authentic leadership.
Good point.
Nanette, did you have something?
Well,
Sorry, Chris.
we have obviously a really different situation. I'm the one staying, and Chris will be the one retiring. So that puts us in a position where I guess what I'm looking at is counting backwards. You have the month where two people work together. Then you have a process of finding that person, having that person have to give notice, having, you know, and how do you count back from that? And then throw in the extreme shortage, at least in our state, and I think probably in every state, of early childhood educators that are even applying for positions. I just want to know what kind of a timeline, when do we need to start posting this position and start really looking for viable candidates, because you want them to be able to work together for some time, be able to give notice, be able to make decisions. If that person says no, you know, blah, just, I don't know how to count back and do it in a way that we can get valuable and qualified applicants for the position.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, yeah, I mean, you've raised a good point in the non-availability of qualified applicants, but also the fact that once you find someone, they're going to want to give some adequate notice too at their job. And if they don't, then you kind of question.
Are they a qualified applicant?
Right. Are they qualified, and what circumstances are they leaving under? So I think that, you know, I guess I haven't really thought through a definite timeline on that, but it would seem to me that maybe, you know, certainly 2 months before the start date is when you want to start advertising and trying to get some folks in for interviews. So that maybe a month out, you're able to confirm with them, you have the position, it starts, you know, the first of next month, a month out. So, yeah, you got to kind of play this by ear, and you're right. It's a lot of it just has to do with whether you're finding the right person or not. And are you going to have to go into the second search? And so I served a few years back. One of the things that, one of the organizations that ELEA belongs to is the Council for American Private Education, CAPE. And you may have heard that name or seen the newsletters that Corey and I have sent out over the years from CAPE. And so I was on the board for CAPE, and I also served on their search committee for a new executive director. So this is a pretty heavy hitting Washington, D.C. based national organization that represents about 80% of all the private education in the country. Well, we came up with a candidate from the first round, and this was a long process. He turned us down. So we had to start all over and do a second search. Now, luckily, the current executive director said, well, I'll stay until you get someone in place. He was retiring. It worked, and we found a great person in the second go around. But I mean, this whole process ended up taking way over a year. Now, granted, it's a different kind of organization, but the point is, it's also possible you just may not find the right one the first time, but you might the next time. So flexibility is probably the key. I guess that's what I learned from this more than anything is you do want to start early enough so that you give yourself time to, that the call committee gives itself time. And again, if you need to leave and they don't have someone in place, then that's when I really suggest an interim. Again, better to have no one than the wrong one. I don't know if that helps or not. Other thoughts?
And I'll just add, in the last 2 weeks, I've had 2 conversations with pastors who have interim directors, and they're really having a hard time finding a permanent director. And both of these interim directors in completely different parts of the country they were teaching staff that have moved into the interim position while the hiring process is going on. And both of them said, I don't really want to leave the classroom. Like, I'm really not interested in this position, but obviously the council, the pastor, other people have, seen them as having, strong leadership skills. That's why they're the interim. And to both of these people, I said, have you thought about, kind of doing a skills assessment with them and finding out where their gifts and talents lie, what they would love to do with leadership, and how they could work with somebody else who would complement those gifts and talents and let them each still be in the classroom, or hire for those pieces that person does not really want to do. It was kind of eye-opening to both of them to say, oh, like, we could change the job description. Like, it doesn't have to be the exact same job description that we've had for the last 20 years. We can change it, and we can make this position look a little different so that we get the right people in place, rather than trying to find somebody that fits that real specific description.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Yeah, and good creative thinking.
I'll jump in. So I've been at the school for 21 years and been the director administrator for, let's see, going on 17. And I do have a retirement plan. We're planning to be snowbirds, and I think Gail will be close to where you are.
Oh, yeah.
But anyhow, I announced it to the board back in spring. So it's been a little while. So I announced it to the board. But one of the things, and I don't know if I missed it, but I am not really part of the church, and I don't know if other people are either, but I am completely independent of the church. We have our own 501(c)(3) tax ID number. So we are not really part of the church from that perspective. So I am, and I don't know if others are in that same circumstance, but it was difficult to find people. I went back, I have nobody on staff that would be a good fit. And I also this year, unfortunately, have a teacher who has been diagnosed with ALS. So I know I needed to support her as well. So I finally found somebody right before school started that was willing to do the training and kind of be part of the classroom, as well as training to take over. So she had her kids here many years ago. I took a lot of faith in God that he was presenting her at the right time, at the right place. So, but my plan, and as we're talking about these transitions, there's so many hats that we wear in this role. It's hard to put everything down, but hearing about it, I know I need to get more of that written down. But I have intentions to be with her, but be out for some of the winter and still be available to answer questions and things like that. So, and then ultimately plan to transition at the end of the school year.
Yeah. So being able to, I mean, sometimes it works that way where you have the ability to be together and transfer that information and model and show someone what it looks like rather than just having them read documents that you've left behind. I mean, obviously that's useful. What other things? But let's go back for just a minute, Lori. Sorry.
Yeah.
So is your school, you're not just renting space, however, you are considered a ministry of the congregation, is that correct?
Yes, we are considered a ministry of our church, but we're an outreach ministry. So we are like categorized as the Lutherdale Camp and the Mount Meru Coffee Project. Even though we're housed in the building, we're right here and all that kind of stuff. But the church views us as an outreach ministry. But we do work closely with our pastor. You know, she'll come and we'll overlap at things, we'll share information. But I am completely separate as far as financially, we're separate. How we run things, but we are paying rent to the church.
Okay, so where does the buck stop? Who's the actual owner? Your board of directors is the owner?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else have that situation, or are the rest of you ministries of the church?
Am I the only one? That's interesting.
I think so. I think
Wow.
you're it. You're Lori. Okay, so Corey will be impressed if I can remember this. All God's Children in somewhere in Wisconsin.
Yes, that's right. Very good. Yeah.
Okay.
And we also host a 4K school district site here as well. So
Mhm. Yeah, so your situation is rather than dealing with the church council leadership board, you're dealing with your own board is really the one that they're the ones that need to be responsible for.
exactly. So I announced it to my board, and I'm sure like many of you others, you know, the people that are on your board are, you know, people that you know well, or church members. Like we have the former people that started the preschool who I took over years ago. So they're on my board, and my parents are people that I've, you know, known and picked. So in a way, they've given me kind of a lot of full reign, so to speak, of being able to do things. But as soon as I announced it to them, I also announced it to the church staff as well, which I also participate. I do go to all the church staff meetings as well.
Okay, so kind of almost a hybrid situation.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of an unusual what I'm learning. So
Yeah, a little bit. Other thoughts, comments, questions, things you want to talk about?
You mentioned before that you felt that some of parents had been on a call committee. Did you mention that? No, parents or staff members had been on. Corey, you had.
I did, yeah. I had,
Um,
yeah, go ahead. What's your question?
Do you think that's a valuable thing to do or suggest either parents and or other staff people be on a?
So I didn't have, I went back to my current staff and shared with them each time, and we went through applications and things like that. So we had a real intentional conversation about it, but they were not on the hiring committee. But on the hiring committee, I did have one parent who was a member of the congregation and had a student, and one parent that had a student in the program but was not a member of the congregation, a council member, and my pastor. And from my perspective, those two parents really were able to take the educational side of what they were looking for from, you know, continued leadership of the program into account, more than just it being a ministry of a congregation.
Yeah, I just wanted to get some more information about that because I don't know that that's presently being planned, but Pastor Hector, I see that you're on there, and I don't know what's being planned, so I don't know what to suggest or not to suggest. So I was just wanting to know if that was helpful from that perspective. And it sounds like it was in your situation.
It really was. She's a parent of 4 kiddos and 3 of them came through the program. She was also a public school teacher in the district and we housed a pre-K site at our program. So there's so much crossover in that community that it was really helpful to have those different perspectives.
I would think it really depends on who the parent is. I mean, there's some parents where if they have their own personal agenda, you know, and that they're only looking at it from their own standpoint, you don't want them. But you'd have to know the person. It sounds like this is someone who was able to be very objective and look at it from a variety of standpoints.
And I would assume as any staff people that would fall under the director's line of command in a sense, would be a conflict of interest for them to be on the call committee. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I would say that's true. Mhm.
You wouldn't want them to be inputting in the decision-making for someone who's going to be their boss, essentially, right?
Right. Well, yeah, you definitely, right. You definitely don't want staff involved in it. It's the same reason, you know, I was called as a consultant some years ago for a preschool in Washington State, not near you guys, but up in somewhere, I forget, Blaine or Ferndale or someplace up there. And they were having all kinds of issues. And I mean, the pastor and the board and the director were all fighting. You know, it was just one of those big, excuse my language, it was a shit show. And they called me in to do some consulting and try to straighten the mess out. And one of the problems was the teachers were also attending the board meetings. They were serving on the board. I said, no, you're voting on the director's salary. You're voting on policies. These people are employees. I just, and they'd never thought about it. I said, oh, there's something wrong with that. Yeah, there's something wrong with that. So clearly it's, you know, there is a procedure, a hierarchy of who's involved and who has authority and who doesn't. And so the parent, yeah, if you think it's the right parent on the call committee, but I'm even really against having parents on, I don't think parents should be on boards unless they're like, you have one parent rep position or something, but limited from that standpoint. But I don't think on the call committee, it's appropriate to have staff at all. And I don't think staff should also be involved at all in the board. You know, maybe somebody has a reason for that I haven't come up with, but I just think in general, it really muddies the lines of accountability. Now, with that said, as you, Corey and Chris both know, and Shirley, with ELEA, and Brenda was on the board at one time too, we did have staff people come to the board meetings, but it was only, they were there to take minutes because that way the volunteer secretary didn't have to be involved in taking minutes. And partly because if you remember right, Shirley, when we started that, it's because the secretary at the time spent more time FaceTiming with her grandkids on the internet than she did taking minutes. You know who I'm talking about. But there are some exceptions for specific purposes, I suppose, in meetings is the point I'm trying to make. Other thoughts, questions, scenarios?
Good night, Gail. It's Marlita.
Hi, Marlita.
I can't seem to pick a date. How do we go about that?
Oh, yeah.
I've been here 20 years. The first 12 years, there were 12 different directors.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you're ready to retire, sounds like. You want to go.
Well, I don't know.
Oh, well, that's the first decision.
That's it. I'm trying to decide, should I or should I stay here for a little longer? I mean, That,
Yeah, I mean, that's really a tough one. That's kind of a personal decision. I do think that there comes a point where fresh, honestly, one of the reasons I decided to retire from ELEA 2 years ago was I'd done 20 years and I just felt that 20 years was long enough, that new leadership was needed. That's my feeling. I felt that whoever it was, Corey or someone else, would come in with some new ways of doing things, some new ideas. And I just felt like I don't feel that I'm brain dead by any means, but I also didn't think I was coming up with a lot of new, fresh ideas. Plus, I just kind of knew this COVID thing was coming and it was time to leave. Just teasing.
well, I listened to that.
But I think that it's a question you have to ask yourself. Do you feel that you're able to continue to get enjoyment out of the position yourself, and then B, contribute what needs to be contributed to the program? And it's a pretty personal, thing you have to look at. It's hard to answer that one for you, but maybe that's where you start, is by trying to put together a retirement plan. If I was retired, what would I be doing and how would I be spending my time?
Okay. All
I
right.
don't know if that helps, but I guess that's what I would say. I think that's where you need to start. Because, and one of the comments that someone made, I'm looking for my notes here that I printed out, when I had asked, are there other pieces of information or questions that may be useful for me to know about before the webinar? One person said, I started the program at my church 33 years ago. How will I ever let go? Oh, and Diane raises her hand. You're admitting you said that. Okay. And that's a really valid point. How will I ever let go? And we had an elementary principal at one of our schools in Southern California. And Shirley, you might know I probably do know who I'm talking about. How long had she been there? 40 years or something? Her husband was the pastor and she was the principal. And bless her heart, I think she was doing a pretty good job, but I just don't know how you can come up with anything new or innovative after 40 years. I just feel there's a point where you need to step aside and let someone else come in and do this. And again, Diane, for your comment, how will I ever let go? I know part of it is you're probably afraid things will go to hell in a handbasket and they'll close the school, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
How many of you were
Because
afraid of
COVID was not friendly to us. We didn't even open last year, and now so we're trying to recoup from that. And
yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a really sticky wicket. And because I hit the point this summer, and Corey can tell you, I called her one day and I said, so, it's been great. I've had lots to do now for the first 2 years, but I'm kind of caught up on some of my projects, and I got to be honest with you, I'm getting a little bored. And so, do you need any help doing database updates? Now, for most of you, you would think that is really a boring job, but those of you that know me know I love data and statistics. I just love this stuff. So to me, doing database updates and finding out, how many staff, how many kids, who's the director, whatever, on schools that we haven't had any contact with, and I can do most of that on the internet. I love doing things like that. So I said, do you want a little help when I have a few hours here or there? And she said, guess what? She said, yes. Imagine that. But the point is, I really felt I needed to stay away for 2 years and let Corey really do her thing and get a strong foothold in leadership. I didn't want to, and I've been pretty incognito, partly because I was enjoying retirement, and for the most part I am. I just needed a little bit to do to stimulate my brain and get reconnected with the whole school idea from that time to time. But I also just felt that she needed to really not have me around and in her way, but she knows I'm here if she needs me. And I think to me, that's probably the important thing, to do is whoever's coming in, you know, give them your phone number, your email, and just say, if you need me, if you've got a question, I'm here for you. But other than that, just sort of stay out of the way. You don't want to be that director that hangs around and, you know, pops in once a week and asks how it's going, or go to lunch with the teachers and talk about the new director and, you know, whatever. There's just a whole lot of no-nos with this. And I think that you need to be very respectful and give them a chance.
It's
One other
kinda like-
question,
Oops. Go ahead.
just a really quick question. When you come up with a list of your job description, and mine will be updated, but there's a lot of things that are personally that I love to do, but maybe someone else wouldn't like to do, so it doesn't have to be a part of the job description. For instance, I like gardening. So I do all the gardening beds and keep up all of that, like the entrance and everything, but a new person might not like that. So, but it needs to be done. So would you write something in like that? And then I don't know how to.
Yeah, I think on your a list of the things that you do, maybe you put an asterisk by the things, and, you know, with a little bullet point at the bottom saying, these are things that need to be done. I've chosen to do them because I enjoy them, but they could be assigned to another staff member.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, I even, when I was putting together my information for leaving ELEA, as most of you know, my job was, you know, it was 35 to 40% travel. So I made a list of 3 years running, every trip I had taken, because it's all on my calendar. And I said, these are essential trips. You got to do it. You're not going to get out of this. And these are optional trips that it's, you know, someone else could do it, or maybe you could Zoom in or whatever. So I don't know, Corey, I think that was probably useful too, wasn't it? To be able to determine.
Well, yeah, and then there was zero travel for how long, right?
Right, it was a moot point because
Right, it really was. Yeah, it really was. But Chris, I was gonna say the same thing. So when I had my preschool, I loved raising baby chicks. My dad built me this huge, you know, brooder box with plexiglass on the front so the kids could watch the chicks. And I ordered the eggs, I incubated them, I hatched them, I overnighted new chicks when all of the eggs were bad. You know, I did all that. I came in the morning and I cleaned the brooder box. You know, I took the chicks outside so the kids could touch them outside. I did that because I loved doing that with them. So obviously the staff had to kind of decide, like, do we want to continue doing this? And does one of us do this, or does this go away? And it went away, and it breaks my heart. And yet it's what they decided to do. And now maybe they have a huge garden, or maybe they, you know, maybe they do something else. But there are pieces where you kind of go, I hope somebody takes this.
And chapel is one of those things. You know,
Yeah.
Our two pastors now will be coming in once a month and they take turns, but the rest of the time it's me and current staff. No one at this point in time wants to do that. So that will be another huge one. And I know there's many other directors. You're probably all going, yeah, chapel is a big point of concern.
Yeah, good point, Chris, and really good discussion about what's required of the job and what's optional. And chapel for a director is really optional. I mean, it could just go back to the pastors and let them figure out how that's going to happen. So that's what I would suggest is it's, you know, some of these things, whether you're putting it in an actual job description or on your calendar or whatever it might be, that some of them just have bullet points or an asterisk by it and say, these are important required tasks, in my opinion, but someone else could assume that responsibility.
Okay, that's a helpful way to put it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Marlita, did you have something?
Oh, the only thing I was going to say is that that's what pastors do when they move from church to church, because my husband's a retired Lutheran pastor. And so every church that we were at, you know, we had friends and what have you, but every time we'd move, you know, he always had that, don't go back. Well, I guess that's why I can't pick a date. I still feel good. I still love being here, but I know that, you know, time is moving forward.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
want everybody to be prepared here. But on the other hand, it seems like everybody has their idea of which way to go. And that's causing me a bit of strife or something.
Yeah, I hear you. And you're right. That is what, I mean, in the ELCA, the pastor issue, each synod, I think, has the authority to deal with that a little bit differently, but generally the policy is that you don't stay and worship at the church you just retired from as
Right.
clergy. You move on unless there's some extenuating circumstances and your bishop gives you permission. But I think it is, again, and I mean, I know a story of a pastor up in Washington who he'd left one church and gone to a new one, and the retiring pastor not only hung around, but he set up an RV in the parking lot and did counseling with parishioners. You know, because they told him he couldn't come in the church office anymore because he was being a pain. Well, he put an RV out in the parking lot and people would come in for counseling. And obviously the new pastor, who was a friend of mine who came in, he didn't stay there long because he said, this is just too dysfunctional. It's just,
Wow.
yeah, not working. So there's a reason for those rules. And so I guess, you know, the word on that is be available, be helpful, but you really want to give the new person space and the autonomy.
Right.
Brenda, I saw you light up just a second ago. Do you have a question?
I just was kind of thinking on that same lines, just because, I mean, this is our church and we've been here. My husband was baptized here. My kids have all graduated through here. But it's like, it's going to be weird for a while, because even like on Sunday morning, I'm the preschool director who might be serving communion or who might be reading or who might be working the welcome center. And so it's kind of like, I don't want those relationships to go away, because my children, my growing children, should be able to come here and this should be their home church. And I can't see us going anywhere else. But it's kind of like, how does that transition, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess the one thing there is I would say, don't get on council for a while, or those kinds of leadership positions where you might have the crossover with, you know, but I don't know. I think depending on how you handle it, there's probably a way to stay engaged and it still be your church. When I left Trinity and Everett, when I took the ELEA position, we did end up leaving, but things got really, and I don't know if I finished that story. So they fired the director that replaced me a year later, and they did hire a new director to come in, but so much damage had been done, she just couldn't recover, and they ended up closing another year later.
Wow.
And it was really a great ministry, and we were full day childcare, and we had birth through school age, and it was a busy, vibrant, wonderful place, and it broke my heart, but it wasn't my school. So you can only take so much responsibility for that. So we did end up worshiping somewhere else, just because it was getting very uncomfortable. I felt like it wasn't a really, I didn't feel like I could really truly worship. And I think you'd know that, Brenda, if things were, if you felt uncomfortable, maybe you take a hiatus or something, but I think it can work to stay as long as you're careful about how you are involved in what you do. Does anybody else have thoughts on that for Brenda?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Brenda, that you might have to, you know, go on a sabbatical for a while, you know, take the summer and visit some other congregations and do some traveling, and just give that a little bit of breathing space to be able to come back. But yeah, it's really, I was able to move I moved 7 hours away, so I go back to my home church plenty, and and I visit, and it's nice to catch up, but there wasn't um that really, hard spot of still kind of serving in your congregation the way you always have. I mean, it was the same way for me. I was the preschool director, I engaged with people all the time, no matter what my other role was in the congregation. So having to kind of separate yourself somehow, it just may take a little bit of space. Maybe you need just like a 12-week vacation somewhere.
I totally get it. That's the other thing I'm really worried about, is because this is our church and our home. I live down the street. So, and we don't have plans to move anytime soon. So
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think you also have the right to say to folks, if people come up to you on Sunday morning while you're at church or at a meeting or something and say, oh, I don't think things are going so good over there at school, and I sure wish you hadn't left. I mean, you totally have the right to say, I'm sorry you feel that way. I just really don't feel at liberty to discuss that. I want to let the new person have a chance to, you can set some, they need boundaries, and you can set some boundaries too. What time are we at? We are at 22 after, so a couple more minutes. Anything else?
Just one more thing, Gail. I guess when I saw that you announced this, I thought, oh, that's got to be, a call that I need to start thinking about this. For 20 years, the preschool's kind of been up and down, up and down. We're having a really good year this year. And so I hate to think about leaving, but, I guess God is maybe moving me towards that.
Yeah, I didn't want to leave during COVID because I wanted to recover for COVID, get in a good spot, and then hand something off that is working. So to me, that sounds like a really great time to go, is when it seems to be working well. And the only other question that I have is with the staff, like, for instance, I have said next summer, August 1st is my day. Because I do have a bit of a plan. My husband and I are actually retiring on the same day. And I know, so he's waited all this time past his time of retirement because I needed medical insurance. But so we have this kind of plan, but the problem is the summertime is sometimes when we hear of staff leaving and then rehiring for fall. And so I was hoping that we would have someone by, like June 1st at the latest, so that all those people leaving for the summer would be able to meet the new person and have a little bit of time there before they decide if they're coming back or not. Because, there are schools that have had new directors and staffs leave, or staff people leave. They make a decision based on that. And so, so I think it's kind of precarious. Like you, Nanette, I'm kind of feeling like maybe like mid-May, and even like parents, hey, there's a plan in place for next year, and announcing that and lifting that person up and giving them toot their horn about what they bring would be lovely. But that's months ahead of when I'm going to go, and so it's that whole piece. I think Nanette and I are really unsure of the timing. That's the biggest part for us right now.
Yeah, and I think that in a perfect world, what you're saying is great. You have somebody in place by the 1st of May, you make this big announcement as the parents are going out the door, the staff knows what's happening, you have the new person come on maybe, July 1st, you work together for a month, you're out the door in August, and bingo boingo, everything works great. And it might, I think if that's what you see as being optimum, then that's what you should work for. But just make sure when they advertise the position that they know it's not starting until, whatever the date is, July 1st or whatever, whenever you want them there. You certainly can try. We all know sometimes things work the way they're supposed to, the way we want them to. And if it doesn't, that gives you plenty of time to go back to the drawing board and have them look for another candidate? No.
Yeah.
One last thing I want to share. Let's see now if I do this. Corey, am I gonna? Yeah, okay. I had a few,
Linda had a question too.
oh yeah, Linda. Hi.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Sorry, I've had to go in and out and I apologize.
Okay.
I guess my question is, I'm kind of weighing, because I also do family ministry here at the church. And those jobs are very connected, chapel school and family ministry. And I'm wondering, in a perfect scenario, I'd like to stay in the family ministry position and just kind of ease out of the chapel school position. And I'm wondering if that would be better for everybody, if that would be worse for everybody. Like maybe I could still come and do chapel during the week and as part of my family ministry job, and then kind of live in my perfect little no stress thing. Or, would it be better if I just ease out 100%? And that's, I guess it just depends on your situation, but that's kind of where I'm at. Can I let go of one without the other? Or should I
Yeah.
just walk away from both?
Yeah, that is the question. And I know you pretty well. I think you're somebody who probably could walk away from one thing, but what if the person they hire isn't who you think it should be? How's that going to work for you? How are you going to feel? I don't know. What are some of your other thoughts, some of the other folks, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was wondering if in that position, would you be the supervisor of the new director coming in? Because that's kind of like if I were to hire an assistant director, that's taking one job and dividing it into two. You're not really leaving that position, you're giving that responsibility of that to somebody else. So that would be my thought is what would the hierarchy be, or would there be a hierarchy in that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Would you be their supervisor, or is it two totally separate positions?
Right now, it's two totally separate positions, but they just overlap in that I do chapel here and I do Sunday chapel school, is what we call Sunday school.
Okay.
So I don't know. I actually have somebody like a pseudo assistant, an hour and a half every day now, a teacher who wanted to take on more of a leadership role. And so and again, in a perfect scenario in my head, I'm kind of finding that successor and grooming them, but I don't know if that's what's best for the church either.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's a pretty unique situation. I think it might depend on who the new director is and how they would perceive you being there in a parallel position. Maybe there's a way to look at this where you keep that position, but you stop doing chapel for the chapel school. So you end the relationship with the school.
Yeah, I was just going to offer to do that if they wanted it, not like I'm doing this, but I'm available kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's probably how you have to approach that you're there if they need you, but they need to be very honest about that. And the board, so just to clarify, Linda, you at one time you owned the school, but now it's back under church leadership, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
It's been about 4 years we've been back under the church.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but I couldn't quite remember how that panned out. Yeah, I think that's something to consult with your board and with the church council about, see how they feel about that.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really like Nanette's idea though, too. If you already have somebody who's kind of moving into more leadership roles, would your council be willing to let that the family ministry person be the supervisor to the director of the school, and kind of have that play out? Because if you left that position, I could see it being filled by another pastor, and that would seem appropriate too, that person oversee the Early Childhood Center. So it could work.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I think it's time to wrap up. I will send this, it's a short little PowerPoint, but if you want it, I do have some links in here to some articles that might be useful. The first one is from Bloomerang. .co on surviving nonprofit founders syndrome. There's a couple of them from NAIS, which is the National Association of Independent Schools. Those are the private schools that are non-faith based. They have some great resources. The National Association of Episcopal Schools, Board Source, and the Psychology Today article on 4 different ways to think of retirement might be useful. So if you would like me to send you the PowerPoint so that you have those links, I will be happy to do that. My email is
Gail, you don't even have to do that. I will put the recording of this
oh,
session
perfect.
with the
Perfect.
slides in the same place that all of our Schools Connect calls have gone.
Okay.
Which there's just a tab right on the homepage of our website.
Okay.
So you click on that and then they'll see the recording and they'll see a little link for the slides.
Okay, perfect.
Or
And then
you
you can
can
go
just
to
take a
this.
picture of it with your phone.
Oh, or you can take a picture of it with your phone. Yes.
Yeah.
They are live links. So if you, if you click on them, it will take you to the article. So, or you can just Google them and you'll find it that way too. Yeah, whatever works for you, but that works. That's a great idea, Corey. So, well, thank you for having me today. It was good to see all the friendly, familiar faces. And so just my one last little thing I'll say is that next year, October of 2022, I will be at the Milwaukee conference where ELEA is partnering with LAA, because there's another organization that will be part of that, and I serve on their board, the CUEM, the Center for Urban Education Ministries. And I'll be there. And I also am just so honored to be the Donald Vetter Award recipient this year. Thank you again to ELEA for that. And I know that's being kind of announced at that event. So I will be there. So all of you who I want to see, and that's all of you, please go to Milwaukee next year and I'll get to see you all.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate for you being here. I appreciate everybody who was able to attend today. And again, I'll put all those links up. They should be up by tomorrow morning.
Super. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Gail.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Corey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.